Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Conversations in Pop Culture, and it's brought to you by my class, Comic Book Investing 101. If you'd like 20 free days to learn how to invest in comic books, please sign up using the link down below. And today I have with me referee Kris Levin. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate being here.
Yeah, I'm very excited because I think that you are having one of the best 2020s out of all of wrestling. And I hate to say that in the middle of COVID because it sounds crazy and bizarre as a bunch of opportunities have come your way. And the one I want to start with is ICW No Holds Bar, which sort of came back in June. And how'd you get involved with them? Because that's a whole different ball game than everything else on the planet right now.
Absolutely. So I've known Danny for years. He used to be involved with Game Changer Wrestling, and before that, we're just two Jersey guys who have been doing it forever. Danny started, I think, the late '90s. I started in 2007, and we just get along great. I worked with him at GCW. I've done a tour in Mexico with him, and I've been working at ICW a few years now. And once they rebranded, I was already the head ref there, and I was all about it. And I'm still super about the direction they're going, and I can't wait to be back in the ring there on November 6th, I believe, in Jersey.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to talk about ICW and what they've gone through. So they've done ICW New York, and that was more traditional, probably a little bit cleaner, I think is a good way to put it. And then now they're ICW No Holds Bar. And then they also went through a modification brand with Pit Fighter Act.
Mm-hmm.
And so they are a deathmatch wrestling company.
Yes.
And so that is a very different ball game. So how aware are you in the ring when that is happening? Because a lot of shit is flying at you. There's light tubes and contraptions and everything that you could possibly imagine. So what is that like to be in that environment? Because I've heard it from Akira, and Matt Tremont's going to be on in a few weeks, and a few other deathmatch wrestlers been on, but we've never heard it from the referee side on my
For me personally, I'm at a point in my career where I describe the way I feel as 100% clarity. And it wasn't always that way. I remember dating back to the first time that I refereed a match with blood in it, probably 12 years ago, to the first, kind of a death match I did maybe 9 years ago. I didn't take well to it. I was shell-shocked. And now when I get in there, it really is all business. It's funny. I actually wrote a story about this for my creative nonfiction class in college, comparing how I first approached deathmatch wrestling to now. And one of my classmates, an older woman, did not take well to the story. She said I was perverse and that what me and my friends were doing were contributing to the de-evolution away from world peace. But no, I go in there. It really is. On one hand, it is all business, because I recognize that in a death match, the competitor's health is a priority in a way that isn't quite as urgent in the standard professional wrestling match. And don't get me wrong, when I say that, I mean, in standard professional wrestling, health is always the primary concern, and there's nothing that ever supersedes it. But in deathmatch wrestling, just the risk is so much higher. So, it just increases that sense of urgency because by definition alone, people are going to be hurt to some degree. It's just a matter of if it's going to be superficial injuries, if it's going to be tasteful injuries, as bizarre and barbaric a way to phrase it, or if it's going to be something far more serious, And the other aspect for me, it's almost a challenge. It's a big challenge, and it's almost like a case of worst case scenario, because in a death match, it's a guarantee that something will go wrong, whether it's a spot that you called, whether something, it just always happens. I haven't had a death match my entire career that didn't fall apart in some way at some point. And being able to have that challenge, to be quick on your feet, to communicate that to everyone, to figure out what's going on, to write the course as best you can, I love that.
So one of the things that I had Akira on, and he was sort of joking around because you kept asking him, and he was a bloody mess. at an ICW show, and I think you know the
Yeah.
match I'm referring to. And this was the
Hmm.
match that he went to the hospital afterwards and was sort of cut up and had a really bad cut in his sort of stomach abdomen region, and he was sort of saying, "Fuck you, Kris," a little bit during the match, and it's a
Yeah.
very interesting moment because obviously a lot of these guys are prideful in this art and they don't want a match stopped. And yet at the same time, there's also that element of blood. And look, you crack a light tube on somebody's head or you take it and you're carving somebody's head up, blood's obviously going to come out. The question becomes that how far do you go, and then when do you know that something is okay and something is not okay? Because again, obviously as a ref, you have a lot of jobs in the ring that I think people forget. Safety is a big issue. And I think people completely forget that. I was at a seminar with Bryce, and he was talking about how he wasn't CPR certified ever, and then he just recently became CPR certified because it's like, how can you not be? And a referee, in many ways, and it's a safety thing. You have to control the pacing. You're there to count the pinfall, but also, Alex Colon also got hurt, and so how do you do those indicators? Because I think that's something that people forget how important referees are. And I think
Hmm.
deathmatch wrestling, and I happen to love it. I think it's brilliant. I think it's an art in its own way. But I also realize that this shit is pretty dangerous. And
Yeah.
if you don't do it the right way and you don't stop, and I guess it's better that you have somebody like a cure pissed at you than a cure being killed or having a serious injury. And so that's something that is a lot of responsibility. So I'm just curious how you go and do that barometer. I think you were speaking about it a little bit, but very curious in that way.
Sure, yeah. And I remember that match very clearly. And I kind of approach it. I'm not sure if you've ever seen the TV show The Office, but
Yeah.
when it comes to injuries and things like that, I guess it's kind of like they're Michael and I'm Toby because they just want to have fun, they want to do their thing, and it's my responsibility to be the one and step in and say, hey, this is going on too far, or this is going in the wrong direction. And Akira was frustrated, and you know what, that's not uncommon to have a guy be in there and you've been waiting for this match for weeks or months or days or what have you, and you're here and your adrenaline's pumping and you just want to go out there and compete and do your thing, and someone's telling you, hey, you got to tone it down. Like, I get that. That's a frustrating thing for anyone, and that's a universal experience for referees. You'll hear every referee who's done anything will tell you a high pressure situation where someone got frustrated, and it's not personal. Like, I guarantee right after the match, Akira, he was talking to me and messaging me on Twitter saying he felt bad. I was like, "There's no need, like your job is to go out." I think I might have told him verbatim. Your job is to go out there and do something stupid, and my job is to try to mitigate that stupidity. And of course, when you're in something as dramatic as professional wrestling, emotions are going to flare, and I don't take that personally because when he's out there doing it, not only he doesn't even realize with the adrenaline what his injury is. That's part of why my job's out there. And when you go out there, as much as I'm a carefree, laid back person, when I go out there, if I can have fun, I will. But at the end of the day, I don't go out there. I'm not out there to be your friend. I'm there to keep you safe. And if you're mad at me and safe, that's fine. People will get over it. And in terms of how do I tell where that line is? It just has come over time where you're exposed to so many injuries, to so much blood that just the sight of it doesn't shock you. You're not going to be like the stereotypical squeamish. You see a drop of blood and you faint. And once you kind of get past that shock, you can start discerning it from a more credible standpoint. And for me, I don't really. It's not like I have like a numerical measure or something like that. I've been around it long enough that I know uh, if a cut looks too deep, if it looks like it's bleeding too much, if it looks too big, if it's on a location I'm not comfortable with. And after that, it becomes a matter of trust. And sometimes it's a communication of, hey, I think we need to start wrapping this up, or hey, let's start taking in this direction. And sometimes it's just me stepping in and say, no, it's not a conversation. We're just stopping this right now. And I don't really get too much pushback from that from the performers anymore. Like, you might expect that, but I think that I've been around enough that people know I'm there solely for their protection. Like I'm not doing it to get myself over or anything like that. So I don't receive that pushback. I think they accept it. If I'm stepping in, it's for a reason, you know.
And I'm sure it's appreciated in many ways as well, because obviously there's been injuries. I don't know if you were the referee during the Danny and Alex Ocean match where they went off of the barn, and I think in Pit Fighter X, and then that was a nasty fall. I don't know if you were refereeing that, but obviously that needed to be stopped on IWTV very quickly because that.
Unfortunately, no, I wasn't. I wasn't able to make it that night. But
But if people who see it, that's one of those moments where you have to
yeah,
stop something because it was clear that both of them were hurt. It wasn't
yeah,
more
and
one wrestler being hurt; it was both of them, which and it looked bad. It looked awesome in on a personal level, but it looked bad also at the same time.
yeah. The last time I was at ICW, it was in August, and we had two shows in one day. And I can count on one hand how many times I've had to make legitimate stoppages in my entire career. And that day alone, I had two, and neither gave much in the form of pushback. It just the injuries happened. They looked pretty rough. Told them I had to step in and stop it, and that was kind of all there was to it.
Yeah, and to even talk about that because ICW is fascinating, and obviously they went from being more traditional and having the rules of pinfalls and submissions to going to chains and then going to no submissions. I think in Pit Fighter there's submissions still, right?
Yes, there is still. So I've only ever done the first pit fighter, and that was before the cage. I haven't even stepped in the cage yet. I can't wait to do that. But you know what? Wrestling by nature is fluid. So as of the first time I did pit fighter, there were submissions. Has that changed since then? I'm not sure, and I'll find out in a few weeks probably.
And so what is that like? Because that was such an interesting story. What happened? So for those who don't know, I believe it was rained out, and then Danny made a determination, and I think a few other people probably had some input where they switched it up. They moved to a barn, and then all of a sudden we get Pit Fighter X, and nobody knows if this is the replacement for Volume 4. And then Danny says, oh, Volume 4 is happening the next day, and then Volume 5 is happening 2 hours later. And so, what was that like to be in that situation where now, oh, snap, like there's movement around and things just got all jumbled up again, and now you're refing another show, essentially?
So that night we were in Millville, New Jersey, which is an hour from my house on the dot, out in the Pine Barrens. And yeah, we got there and everything seemed like it was going to be fine. And you know, uh, in this era, everything is outside basically, so we're at the mercy of Mother Nature. And that's why one of the big reasons I've always hated outdoor shows, just because you lose that sense of control over the environment. And bad luck happened, and a huge storm hit right as we were supposed to be starting the show. And I remember we were all in the tent, that like this makeshift tent that was the locker room, and we're just like at first we're kind of just all chilling, just waiting for it to pass, and then the floodwaters start rising a bit. They start licking at our feet, and we all start clustering towards the center of the locker room because it's surrounding us, and uh, we're just like tighter and tighter in the center because we don't have any other option other than just standing in floodwater. No one wants to do that. And Danny was, stressed out of his mind. The morale of the locker room was wavering. Some people were like, "Come on, let's go out there and do it." Other people were like, "Nah, I'm really about just going back to my hotel room and chilling. I'm mentally over it." You have that entire spectrum, and I was cool as a cucumber. I knew that the storm would pass at some point. We'd figure something out. Like this wasn't just a regular show that like it's canceled and you move on. It's ICW. It's deathmatch wrestling fans, and they are supernaturally loyal to the product and to the performers and to each other. So I knew it would work itself out, and it did. We went to the barn and we decided on the fly to do this pit fighter thing, and I don't want to say everyone, but I think a lot of people were their heart initially was haphazard in terms of, oh cool, we're just doing a no ring show in a barn, that's fun. Oh cool, can we clean up the manure on the ground? Oh no, great, like cool, let's get staff. But the second, at least for me, when Danny went on camera and called it Pit Fighter, which I didn't hear that branding until the camera started rolling and he said it on the microphone. That instantly got me pumped up, like, oh yeah, Pit Fighter, that's awesome. And I feel like everyone kind of got that charge out of it when it's like, okay, we get it now, and we had a little banger of a show.
And to even talk about that a little bit, because you now have Pit Fighter, you have these whole new rules of this rebranding, and it's deathmatch wrestling, and obviously this is now what ICW is synonymous with. How does that all change your perspective on wrestling and wrestling shows? Because I mean, you've wrestled for a lot of companies, Primetime Wrestling. You wrestled for Impact, not wrestled referee, I should say, and then you've been a part of them, and then a variety of companies all throughout IWTV. We're talking about the Masked Wrestler and Campleap Frog in a little bit, and we keep going. You've been doing this for almost over 10 years, I think, right?
Started in 2007, yeah.
So over 10 years. So clearly you've been in a lot of locker rooms and you've done a lot of matches, but obviously how did this entire thing change your perspective with Pit Fighter and even ICW rebranding and where it's going now? And I think you've done stuff for Beyond, and I think you've done some GCW stuff, if I'm correct.
I'm sorry, you broke up the last 10 seconds. We're back now. What was that? Last thing I heard was you've been in a lot of locker rooms.
Oh, yeah. You've been in a lot of locker rooms, and you've done now a lot of ICW shows, and I think you've done some GCW stuff and Beyond Wrestling as well. So how did ICW and this rebranding, this Pit Fighter and this death style match wrestling really change your perspective on wrestling and how you referee and how you really, I guess do your job and also see the business evolving?
So it honestly hasn't. It wasn't too graphic of a change for me because I've been doing I've been GCW's head ref since about 2015, I think. And before that, I did CZW. I've done numerous tours in Mexico, most of them with DTU, which is a deathmatch company down there. So I've had a lot of experience with death matches. So that was nothing new to me. I feel that not necessarily because of ICW itself, but just kind of around this point, um, I feel like I've kind of matured into, uh, I guess I don't want to say my final form or whatever you want to call it, but I feel like I've on a personal and professional level really matured into the role of a deathmatch referee, and uh, over this past year, I would say, just with all of the experiences accumulating with ICW specifically, though, the chains were something that I had to get used to. It's and you might not even be able to tell just looking at it. It's difficult just to get in the ring, let alone you have these chains on the very edge of the ring. And I don't know if you remember Ring of Honor War of the Wire 03, Steve Carino versus Homicide, but the barbed wires wrapped right on the edge, and Steve Carino, a ring veteran, one of the absolute greatest of all time, and he fell right out of the ring just walking around, and his ring awareness is second to none. So that's something I always keep in mind with these ICW shows, with chains right at the edge or with blood sport, no ropes at all. And it seems silly, but it's something that's always present on my mind in a ring that's been adapted, that I can't lose sight of where I'm at, or I will physically fall from the ring. I will put all the attention away from the wrestlers where it should be onto me. It'll stop the show. I might get hurt. So that's been my biggest thing uh, since adapting to all of this. It's a process.
And I have to say, I mean, I love the chain concept, and I think it's brilliant. And I actually never thought about it like that, where obviously chains have somewhat of a less give also than ropes do. And so I could absolutely see how a referee could get hurt and things can happen in that regard, because all of a sudden you realize there's no rope and there's no give in many ways.
Yeah.
So I could definitely see that being out there. But now I want to jump out of deathmatch wrestling. And I want to talk about something that actually happened last night, and it's happening every Wednesday night at 10 that you're a part of. And this is the
Yep.
Masked Wrestler. And I love it. I absolutely think this is brilliant. I'm surprised it took IWTV so long to do it. And so you're the ref, and it's very interesting for those who have not seen it. It's an 8-person tournament. We don't know who any of these wrestlers are, and two of them have a match, and the loser is out of the tournament and has to unmask, and we're seeing some of the best wrestlers in the world on the independent scene and possibly maybe from AEW and a few other companies that allow their wrestlers to actually compete in other products. And so, how did you get involved with that? Because I think that is super interesting. You know, you're sort of front and center, and it's a very tight team, for lack of a better word.
Mm-hmm. I've had an awesome relationship with Jerry and IWTV and everyone there just for a few years now, just working together, doing indies. And, we all get along great. I've been a content provider for them for the last year and a half or so. And yeah, they plan. Jerry came to me and initially he said that, he wanted to do kind of like the Masked Singer, but professional wrestling, and it be like an elimination tournament. And my first thing was, oh, like kind of like the Masked Magician that they did like 20 years ago. And he was like, that's actually exactly what I based it on. I just, said the Masked Singer because that was more topical and relevant. And the second he said that, I got it immediately. I thought it was a cool thing. And yeah, I was excited to be part of it. We went out, filmed it, and it was a blast. It really was. And the Jerry's awesome. He has always been the biggest supporter of independent wrestling, of alternative wrestling media. He really is a genius, and I think people are starting to realize how much of a genius he actually is. And I think once it goes down in the history books, he's going to be looked at as kind of like the Vince McMahon of the indies, someone who really revolutionized things. And what they've done, how they've able to make the presentation so cinematic and so made for TV. I really hope and would not be surprised at all if the Masked Wrestler was going to be on a major television channel in the future. It's that good of idea and it's that good of a production.
And so it's very cool for you too, because in many ways that I don't know, and I'm gonna take a guess here, but obviously nobody knows who these wrestlers are when they're wrestling at each other, and you're in the ring, and your job is to just call it down, and we sort of strip the identities away from these wrestlers, and it's very much focused on them. And as a referee, you know, obviously you're keeping these wrestlers safe, and you're keeping them, making sure the match goes on, but and you're pacing the match to some degree as well. But really, it's on just pure wrestling ability. I would imagine as a referee, it's an awesome thing to experience and witness and be part of and get to call a match that is not based on any over the top gimmick or charisma, but you're just the referee and we're just seeing two people go at it. And it's in that like moment. And so what is that like, calling a match like that and being the referee and you know, just watching pure wrestling, because that's what it feels like when you watch it in many ways.
Yeah, and you know what? You hit the nail right on the head when you said pure. It's kind of a professional wrestling distilled. You strip away the gimmickry, you strip away the pomp and circumstances and the ballyhoo, and it's just wrestlers wrestling. And it's for that same reason that on any given show, if I had the choice between doing a multi-man match or doing a singles, I always take the singles because, like, take a scramble, for instance. If you have a 5 or 6 way scramble, you lose a lot of the artistry of being an official. And even if that's not something that a lot of people in the stands notice, it's something that I, as a performer, notice and I feel. And, if I'm doing that 5 or 6 way scramble or what have you, it's more about dodging out of the way and keeping my head on a spin to make sure that I'm not in anyone's way, that they're not coming. I can go in this corner for a second. No one's coming off the top rope. No one's about to slide in. And when you are doing a singles match, especially for something like the Masked Wrestler, it's just stripped of that completely. And it's right down to, enforcing the rules, making sure the contest stays balanced in that way. So I really appreciate it. It's a great opportunity.
And we're gonna spoil what happened last night, and I hope nobody's gonna mind. But obviously, Lady Frost was unmasked and was Marmalade. I believe
Yeah.
that is the her name in the Masked Wrestler,
Yes.
and it was very cool because I think that everybody got something last night about that. You know, Lady Frost is really good. Like that's and I don't think I definitely thought it was either Solo Darling or somebody like that, where you could tell that the person was amazing. And I know that you've refereed matches with Victor Benjamin. I'm wearing his shirt. Just saying. But what? And you've done stuff for Beyond with them, and I think that this is her first time ever getting an opportunity to really showcase what she can do on a grand stage. And I think taking away the identity in many ways really showed what she can do. And I think she is about to get a bunch of new fans because of that. And you were somewhat a part of that because you're the referee and you were refing the match. So what is this like? Because we are getting to see a bunch of people how what they can do, how good they are, and where they are going, and it's sort of a nice thing in many ways to be part of. And I'm not saying that I'm not trying to take credit away from anybody in that circumstance, but even for you to be involved in that is an awesome thing. And I think that last night was one of those episodes, more so than episode 1 and 2. That really, I think everybody just got that in a minute and in a second. So I'm curious how you
Yeah.
feel about that.
So, I mean, just as an artist, I love being a part of innovative things like this, especially when it's innovative and it's good, and Masked Wrestler is both. And so it's awesome. I love being a part of it. And yeah, I think that's something that's always been part of professional wrestling is that, to use a modern term, it's almost like there's a filter over talent. Like when you think of Instagram filters, where you have these characters or these aesthetics, and a lot of the time it can blind you towards what the wrestler's talent actually is. And sometimes in the past that's been done for the sake of improving the wrestler. Maybe they're not the best wrestler, so you gimmick them up a bit and you make them seem better than they are, which Paul Heyman was the master of in ECW. But other times, I think it's really easy to take a really good wrestler and forget how good they are because of how gimmicky they are. And the first person I think of when I think of that is Gangrel, who, when you first think of him, you think the Vampire Warrior, that he's spitting blood and all of that. But if you actually watch Gangrel's work, and I'm not just talking about the 90s, I mean right up until present, Gangrel was one of the best wrestlers of all time.
His
And
last
if
match with Effie was great.
Yeah, and anyone, a lot of times you'll see, I'll say, make a statement about a wrestler who has that filter and their true talent is obscured, like a Gangrel, like an Orange Cassidy. And anytime I see a fan laugh and dismiss them, the only thing I think is, wow, this isn't a very educated person to our sport. They don't really know what they're talking about, if they're easy to be distracted, confused, or mistaken because of that filter, because they don't like that filter. That doesn't diminish the ability. That doesn't diminish the ability of the performer.
It's very rare that somebody has a filter that is a lateral move. I think the only person I can think of off the top of my head is Warhorse right now, where Warhorse's position and the evolution of Warhorse from Jake Parnell to now Warhorse is almost a lateral and upgrade move where none of his technical ability has left him. It's only gotten better, and it only adds, and it's almost larger than life now. And I think that's
Yeah,
one of the only like things that I can think of off the top of my head where
and you
yeah.
and it's not necessarily always about lateral or not, because like look at the Undertaker, his character. When you listen to his interview he did with Stone Cold, the first 5 years of his character, he didn't put on good matches intentionally, because as much as he wanted to and as much as he had the ability to, he needed to get that character over. So that was just good business. That was good storytelling. And so I think some people might chuckle at this example. Disco Inferno. He has a really silly, over the top character that is awesome, and I mean, obviously it's awesome because we're still talking about it.
But
We still
he
remember
made
it.
Scarlet in Impact in many
Yeah,
ways, and look where Scarlet is, and look where Killer Cross is. That
yeah,
was
exactly. And
partially
they're
because
awesome.
of
I love
Disco,
those two to death.
and
They're
they're
great to
great.
work with.
And Disco, Glenn Galberti, I think, made Scarlet an Impact without a doubt, no question,
Oh yeah.
no
Yeah, that was a
question.
lot of fun. I ref those matches, and they were a blast. Absolutely. And Disco, again, he hasn't had major television publicity in 2 decades. and people still remember him. They still remember his character. And if you go back and watch a Disco match, Disco was a really good wrestler. And if you don't think Disco's a good wrestler, that's a person who doesn't know what good wrestling is. That's not a matter of opinion, whether you like him or not, just whether he's good or not and knows what he's doing. His fundamentals are rock solid.
I agree. I agree. And I came way after Disco, and I've looked back on stuff that he has done, and it's really good stuff. And his mind is brilliant, and there's a reason why he's in that company. And people say, "Oh, why are we paying him?" Well, there's a good reason why. He's one of probably really smart and really wrestling savvy.
Yeah, and and Disco, Glenn's clearly a provocateur. He likes to say things that get people's goat, and he says a lot of things that I personally think are objectively dumb. But as a professional backstage, he's nothing but class. I've had zero issues working with him, and honestly, he's always gone above and beyond. And you know what? I hate to damage the kayfabe and the myth of Disco, but just to share a story. When we were when I used to work with Impact, we did a show. We did a few days of tapings in Philadelphia at the ECW Arena, which is literally 1 hour from my house. So, I'm local. That's no big deal for me. And after the show was over, I was giving Great Gama and his son Raj a ride to the show every morning. We all stay at the same hotel, and they're awesome too. And Disco asked if he could hop in, gave him a ride, and he asked if we could stop at a Wawa afterward, which for anyone who doesn't not from this area, that's like a 7-Eleven or something like that, like a deli place.
If you've never been
And
to Wawa, you got to go find one. It's like the best thing. I have one literally a block and a half away that opened up 2 years ago. It's the best thing in the world. But yeah, continue.
And so anyway, we just went in, got our stuff, and he just went and grabbed my stuff, and he's like, "I'm covering it." I go, "Oh, you don't have to do that." He's like, "Listen, man." He's like, "When I started," and he's talking like early '90s. He goes, "I drove." I'm not going to say the person's name, but he said I drove a former famous television wrestling talent around for several years, and not once did they offer trans or to buy me a meal or anything like that. And when I was at a point in struggling, that really could have made a difference. So I always want to go out of my way to pay it forward for the people who helped me out. And he didn't have to do that. That's just pure class on his end.
Yeah, no, that some people are like that, and some people are not. It's in every profession. In my profession, some people are very generous in the comic book and podcasting world, and some people are assholes, for lack of a better
Yep.
word, especially when you're doing them favors. And I've learned a while ago that people who are assholes, I drop them quicker now than ever before, and I can spot one miles away, and I'm sure you can too. With everything that you've been through, I'm pretty sure you can determine within a few minutes when somebody's being a dick or not.
And you know what? There's so much such a sense of smoke and mirrors in wrestling. Sometimes it's difficult because I've definitely went into road trips with only like a peripheral interaction with a person, and I've thought, wow, this guy's obnoxious, or I'm not going to get along with him. And then you go on a road trip and you find out that that's the coolest person in the world. That so they're both sides of it. MJF, I didn't think I was going to get along with him, and we were on a road trip together, and he we hit it off so well. He admitted he didn't think he was going to get along with me either, and we get along great, and that's happened time and time again, and I love when that happens, honestly.
Life is strange
Yeah,
is it's a video game, and it's a great saying because it's true. It's
it
so
is.
true. It's a great game because of it as well, where it deals with some stuff, and you get to make a lot of choices in that game to determine other outcomes, and it's super interesting. But I do want to talk about it because you brought something up, and it's kind of touching upon this, and this is your personal projects and
Hmm.
Tales from the Mat. And so this is, I think, almost 2 hours of the first episode. A lot of stuff. It's an audio docudrama for those who are interested. And we're dealing with gatekeeping and Lou Thres's trainer, George Tragos. And we're going old school, like 80, 90, I think almost 100 years ago in wrestling.
Yep.
Way early history, way before my time. I had no idea who these people were when I was listening to it. So I'm sure a bunch of people don't know who these people are, but I'm just curious. How did you even come up with this idea? Because this is fascinating in its own right, and wrestling history is super interesting, going back 50 years, let alone 100 years ago.
Just me as a person, I'm someone who's always leaned towards that anthropological, historical side of things. And I think a big part of that is just, growing up in South Jersey, right outside the Ripley's Believe It or Not auditorium, which, my dad took me to all the time. I grew up for an appreciation of the weird. And that always stuck with me. I have an associate degree in history. I'm pursuing one right now in journalism and a bachelor's. And a few years ago, I did an interview with Ryan Bowman over at the Gorilla Position, and it went really well. And he was like, "You know what? I have the feeling like you're a writer, just talking to you." And I was, but I had been out of practice because I'd been focusing on wrestling for a few years. And he invited me to come put some material on his website, and I hadn't done it in several years. So I went and I started pursuing the stories that I was interested in. Again, it's that anthropological, dealing with culture, dealing with history, dealing with how people interact, and that just opened so many doors for me. It refined my writing ability. It put me on the path that I'm on currently. It got me working with Ripley's Believe It or Not, doing the same sort of thing, and I've always if I'm curious about something, and this happens a lot daily, I'll research it online, and if I can't satisfactorily find an answer, or the answer is so widespread that I need to do a bunch of research to figure it out, I think, you know what, if I have this question, I have this interest, others probably do as well. So I format it into an article. And during the lockdown, I think that was a time where once you kind of adjusted to it, the changes, I think a lot of us creative types were, how can we use this? How can we push the boundaries of our creative limitations and take what we do to the next step? And in wrestling, you're seeing that with, cinematic projects like Campleap Frog and whatnot. But with my own personally, and maybe I'll sound like a dummy saying this, I had just never had the thought to take my written words and put them in an audio format like that, and which is wild because I listen to podcasts all the time, getting ready for bed at night or on the road going to shows. I love them. I listen to them more than music. And when the light bulb went off that I could do that, we were off to the races. And I had a Tales from the Mat syndicated column that I'm sure I'll still continue to put out, but I was thinking, there's plenty of stories that I'm sure would have wider viewership if I had them as podcasts or audio docudramas like this past one, as opposed to written word. But a story captured my interest, and that was reading Luthez's book, Hooker, which he wrote in the 90s. And for anyone who's unaware, a hooker in professional wrestling is like an old-timey guy who can sink his hooks into you and really hurt you. Um, he told a story about his trainer, George Tragos, who was an Olympian in the 20s. And it's like this tall tale, perfectly emblematic of all of the horror stories you hear of professional wrestling back in the day, of the Andersons, breaking dudes' legs and arms trying to get into the business. And the story goes, allegedly, that George Tragos, that's his trainer, was facing a young guy who was a legitimate wrestler who there's disagreement about who would win, who would lose, that sort of thing. And they decided just to go out there and figure it out in the ring. And allegedly, Tragos jammed up the kid's shoulder and tore it out, and so severely that in the 30s, in the days before antibiotics were invented, the kid lost his arm due to gangrene. And it's such like a captivating, terrifying, and possible story. Like, it sounds like a thing that could happen, that I was curious, who was this kid? If someone lost their arm, there's a record of it somewhere, And I decided I wanted to pursue that, and I was able to convince Jimmy Wheeler of the Professional Wrestling Historical Society to help me in that pursuit. And Jimmy is one of the most skilled researchers and archivists you would ever hope to meet of professional wrestling. It's his passion, it's his life's calling, and it wouldn't have been possible without him to produce that. We spent months. He went through the archives, and together we went through what he was able to pull out, and we pieced together what we thought happened, and we compared notes, and months and eventually we figured it out. At least I'm satisfied we did. And I think anyone who knows my personal journalistic standard of figuring something out, of declaring something solved, they'll know that's a very high standard. And along the way, I realized that this whole story is a great lens to examine gatekeeping in professional wrestling, or bullying, or how people
Yeah.
uh, just treat each other badly. And I think that's become even more pertinent with
Yeah.
June, with the speaking out movement, because
Let's talk
that's
about
the worst. That's the worst version of gatekeeping, is when you take that bullying and turn it to, sexual harassment or abuse. And with that lens, I thought I could make a bigger statement about where we are, where we were, where we're going. And I was able to talk to three professional wrestling's three great people to give different perspectives: Gerald Briscoe, Dr. Tom Pritchard, and Lufisto, who each came up in different eras, different perspectives, but they're all tremendous talent and legends in their own right. And I'm thrilled with how it all came together.
So to talk about that, because I think that there is two sides to this, and I'm about to say something slightly controversial. I think there is a healthy gatekeeping of determining that, look, do you know what you're getting yourself into the business of wrestling? I think that they're, and maybe gatekeeping is not the right word, but maybe a reality check. I think everybody agrees that if you want to become a professional wrestler, you should know what you're getting yourself into. But there's also a big difference when what's happened in all this and putting down. I mean, Billy Dixon has been on my show, and Billy has horror stories, and there's a variety of other people. I think Jared Evans, who has been on my show, has horror stories, and we've seen certain things come about, and we don't need to rehash all of this. There's plenty of news, but we've seen stuff with Chikara, we've seen stuff with Primetime Wrestling. I think CCW is another one that we could talk about with that deals with this. And obviously, I mean, there's so much information. Me and Lufisto shot for 40 minutes on this show about CCW. So
Mm-hmm.
clearly, there's a beyond anybody can find anything that's going on with that. I think so. But what is that like? Because I know that you've had certain issues with companies, and we don't need to rehash that and all that stuff. And I know that there's been some toxicity in wrestling. And so, what was that like for you to say, "Hey, this seems so relevant today"? And it's not the same, as the 1930s. Obviously, I don't think anybody's breaking anybody's arm out of their socket so easily. I think that'd be pretty publicized if that was
Yeah.
happening in 2020. But at the same time, there it is being done more in subtle ways. I mean, we can talk about a matter of pride as well, and there's horror stories from that as well with what's going on and all sorts of stuff and whatnot. So, what was this like to take something that is history and then transform it and say, hey, look, this hasn't changed, or there's similar problems that still exist? Because it's very cool when you can say, well, 100 years ago they were dealing with X, and now we're still dealing with some part of X.
Mm-hmm. Just to go back on what you were saying before, you know what? I don't think that gatekeeping is a flat negative. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of negative things about it, but not everyone gets to grow up to be a cowboy or an astronaut, there needs to be that reality check that you were talking about. So I think it's less about saying gatekeeping is wrong and more about saying, because if there was no gatekeeping, what's then anyone could just be on primetime television, and
It
not
has
just
to
in
be
wrestling, I
done
mean
right.
anywhere.
It has to be done right versus
Yeah,
being done
exactly.
wrong. And again, I said it was controversial because I know what I was saying could be completely misconstrued, and I don't want to trivialize the horror stories. And so I'm going to
Hmm.
clarify my position on that, where I don't think if something is done as a reality check, it's bad, but at the same time, it hasn't been.
Yeah, and you know what? Everyone's line is going to be different, and it's going to be based off of what they experienced when they came in. Um, and I, so I agree. There's a line. Me personally, I got my ass beat all the time by my trainers, and I am thankful for it. It was a lesson in humility. I learned how to sell. I thought it was very fundamental to learning professional. I think getting your ass beat is very fundamental to learning how to be involved in professional wrestling in a physical capacity. So But obviously, there's a line. Uh, Sammy Callahan, one of my main trainers, he's threatened to break my arm plenty of times when I was a mouthy little teenager, but not once did he actually break it, And that's where that line is, I think. And you know what? You'll have some people who. One of the things that blew my mind was so take Jerry Briscoe. Jerry Briscoe is the epitome of a hooker. He's one of the last around. If he wants to hook you, he'll hook you. And he stretched out plenty of people over the years, which is fine. I don't fault him for that. That's where the business was, and I've been stretched out. I think if more people were stretched out, the business would probably be better. But Jerry, when I asked him about it, he regrets it. And we talked about that in the podcast. He completely regretted the things that he did when he was younger. He wished he did them differently, and he thinks that we're a business now that have gone beyond that. And that was mind blowing to me, but that's a perfectly reputable opinion. And it's also just as reputable for Dr. Tom to say, yeah, I'm not going to stretch you out, but I'm going to blow you up. And if you're going to hurt yourself, that's your choice to hurt yourself. And it's also perfectly fine to take another trainer who says, yeah, I'm gonna toughen you up a bit. It depends on where your comfort level is with it, but there's definitely a spectrum. It's definitely not a net bad thing, but it can be a bad thing if a predator abuses it. Someone who is less interested in educating you and more interested in getting their jollies by hurting you or by scaring you. That's when it becomes an issue.
Yeah, I agree, and I mean, Bubba Ray or Bully Ray has spoken about how he was working with La Resistance, and one of them wasn't getting it, and he was saying, I forgot who he was saying it to, but he said like, sometimes you gotta slap. They wanted to like slap the kid on his head a little bit because he wasn't getting it, and they didn't. Obviously, Bully Ray didn't do it, but he was saying, and he was like saying to like his agent, like, what would you do? And like his agent understood exactly. Where sometimes what is it? Somebody's not getting something. Sometimes you need to get a little bit physical. I mean, I used to do a lot of martial arts stuff, and we spar, and there's physical contact, and sometimes you need somebody to push you a little bit and
Mm-hmm.
I guess stretch you or put you into an arm bar and maybe make it hurt a little bit so you understand how it's done. And the goal isn't to break your arm, but it's to show you, and then you say, "Oh, I get it now," and it sort of humbles you up a little bit. Or sometimes somebody needs to sweep you without you knowing they're about to sweep you, because it registers in your head saying, "Oh, okay, now I'm not such a little cocky asshole anymore."
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think, but at the same time, everybody comes into wrestling a little bit differently, and I also think though that to some degree that if you're training and that's happening, you have to make a determination for yourself as well. Like, hey, what trainer do I go with? Because
Mm-hmm.
right now I'm looking for a coach in my business to help me get to the next level, and I'm going to be interviewing several coaches to see what style I want. And I understand it's not exactly wrestling, but I have to see what personalities work with me the best. I think
Yeah.
that's something.
It's not about something. Yeah, and exactly, it's what works with you because it's not a matter of something working or not working. It's depends on the individual.
And I just think this is great because I love when people take something in history and then we talk about this gatekeeping. And then I think that, I don't know if you intended it to be a little bit edgy and approaching this topic and it being a little bit controversial, but obviously I think this was great. I think it was brilliant what you did with it. And
Thank you.
so I really enjoyed it, and I think this is episode one. I got a feeling you're going to be doing more of these episodes, and a lot of cool
Yeah.
people were in it. I think this is Anthony Green's like officially his last thing that he's going to do, and hopefully he won't ever be able to do it again. And we don't say this to be mean to Anthony Green. We just don't want him around on the Indies anymore. And if anybody knows that, and he's been on my show twice, and if anything, but he knows why I say it out of a place of love, not hate.
Mm.
Um, but what was it like to have all these indie wrestlers in it as well?
Well, you know what? Anthony Green is actually one of my best friends, and before I had said that I was unable to attend the first pit fighter event, not the first one that used the cage. The reason for that was I was doing a cross country road trip with Anthony. I was helping him move to Florida when he was going to NXT. We took that 20-hour trip together. Um, Anthony, he provided voice acting for Tales from That right before he left. He he came up with the title for Campleap Frog, for both Campleap Frogs. He created the title for both of them. Um, so
We say this out
all
of
the
love, right? We don't want him back, right?
Yeah, exactly. Anthony, he's one of the few people I talk to every single day. Um, and the entire cast of Tales from the Mat, they're my friends. They're all these independent talent who I love and respect, from Royce Isaacs and Blake Chadwick, Phil Stamper, Rich Palladino, Masha Slamovich, Troy Nelson, Ari the Greek. And Salima, my girlfriend Salima, read the credits. I'm sure that I'm um, missing a handful of people.
Very good professional wrestler.
A very good professional wrestler. Oh yeah, he did the Luthez read. He was the first person I spoke to about this when it came to voice recording. Sydney Bacabella did the reading for Freddie Blassie. Anthony's girlfriend Ava Everett, she did a reading. We had a lot of people on there, and I apologize to anyone whose name I forgotten, because it was a big cast of a lot of quick cameos. Just because I love positivity. I love having my friends involved with things, and I'm not one of those people who will put them in a place that they don't belong. Like, oh, they're my friends, so I'm going to put them in the main event, But I love working with your friends, finding where they succeed, where their star shines brightest. And I thought it was an awesome cast from on Tales from the Mat. And, I feel the same way about Campleap Frog. And I'm sure you were going to pivot there, but I'm going to beat you to it. But that's kind of all what Leapfrog is it's an all-day party that's socially distanced and responsibly handled, that throughout it we will periodically shoot cinematic scenes and wrestling matches, and I think that same infectious energy translates from the campground through the screen. But maybe you'd be able to tell me better than that, because I've seen both sides of it. I'm biased.
Well. One of my favorite movies is Wet Hot American Summer, so that should give you an idea, because it legitimately starts off that way. Like the entire opening of Camp Leapfrog starts off in that entire era. And I'm pretty sure whether that was intentional or not, that's what it feels like.
So
Yeah, please.
okay. So personally, I've never seen Wet Hot American Summer. However, the writing team that we had for the first Leapfrog, between the four of us, everyone had seen at least each of the movies. And I'm when the heavyweights, the Wet Hot American Summers, the list goes on and on of nostalgic summer camp films that came out of the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s. And we took all of those that we could, all of the tropes, for the good, the bad, and we thought, how could we address them, or how can we subvert them in a way that's fun? And that's what the first Leapfrog was about. It was about harnessing that nostalgia, combining it with good wrestling, and having a good time, creating a wrestling cinematic experience. And that's what we're doing for the new one, which right now we're only as we record this, we're 5.5 hours from the premiere of Open Swim, which is our version of Free for All, which is going to be a half-hour show on the Independent Wrestling Facebook page. And then 8 o'clock, Camp Leapfrog, Things That Go Bump in the Ring, our Halloween special premieres, and I can't wait. You're the last interview I'm doing before we start, before we actually get into the premiere.
So to even talk about this, because what I love about this is that they're at camp, a bunch of wrestlers are at camp, and there's problems that ensue. And well, this is wrestling, so what do? We put on our gear and we fight it out.
Yep.
It's great. It makes 100% sense. That's what's so wonderful about this, is that so the second you buy into this entire concept, everything makes sense, and that's what I love about it. Where I'm not watching a wrestling show anymore. I feel like I'm watching, I don't want to say I'm watching Glow, but I'm watching something like that. And I think it's truly great when you get and you suspend belief. I'm a big comic book guy, and so certain books, when I buy into the universe, everything makes sense. The Walking Dead is exactly like that. The second you buy into it, and you say, okay, this is the new reality, and these are the new rules, great. Everything makes sense now, and that's how I feel about Camp Leapfrog, is that everything makes sense when you say, hey, I'm just going to buy into what's going on, and it's treated like a film and not necessarily a wrestling show. When I'm watching The Masked Wrestler, I know I'm watching a wrestling show. When I'm watching, Limitless Wrestling, I'm watching a wrestling show. Campleap Frog is not a wrestling show. It's a movie that flows into itself. And I know that it's kind of your brainchild and your project. And so for me, this is nice to have that other side of it and have that nice mixture. And I don't know if anybody's told you that, but for me, I'm a big anime guy too, and so it's kind of nice to have that package, not as a wrestling show, and as a show that deals with wrestling and wrestling is used to solve issues, and we're dealing with conflict through wrestling, and it's great, and it makes 100% sense, and I love it. I think it's great. I think it's funny. I think putting people with friendship bracelets and they're having issues, and then you have an issue with tug of war, and like or like there's an issue with basketball was in the first
Yeah.
one, so it's great in that regard. So I don't know how you like. I know that like you came up with the concept and the writing team, and it's obviously Wet Hot Summer is the first one. There's no question about it. I mean, you have a reporter looking for something that's illegal. That's completely in the first Wet Hot American Summer. So it's so good, and so I just love it, and I can't speak highly enough about it. I thought I was going to go in. I thought this is going to be okay, and I was so wrong, and so happy that I was wrong on that. And so, what is it like for you to be sort of behind the scenes behind this, and to have your idea and it's kind of your film, or it's labeled as your film in many ways, and be on the other side and not the referee or a participant in it, but more saying, "Hey, this is my idea, concept, and it's my build."
You know, so for me, being on camera was always more of a means to an end as opposed to the actual end. If something calls for me to act, if something calls for me to referee, happy to do it. But it's not really my passion. My passion is storytelling, and whether that's writing articles, whether it's making films, that's what I really love. And when Camp Leapfrog is really special to me for so many reasons. And I won't take too long to delve into all of them. I'll just say that one of my big projects that I've been working on as of late that started in the pandemic is I'm putting an encyclopedia together of wrestling films. And through that, I've watched hundreds of films, of documentaries, of shorts, of and you see how everyone utilizes professional wrestling and interacts with it cinematically. And I'm talking pro wrestling was one of the first sports filmed in the late 1800s. It was one of the first things in film to have a sequel. It was you see the when you look at all the data points, you see the ebb and flow of pro wrestling movies were really big in the 30s, then they come back again in the late 40s, early 50s, then again in the 60s, then again in the late 70s, and then hugely again in the 80s with the pro wrestling boom. And we're in another renaissance of pro wrestling films now. And to take all these different sources, whether it's like a weird like trauma style Jushin Liger film from the 90s, or it's a Santo movie from Mexico in the 60s and 70s, or whether it's Mr. Moto, who's like an equally racist Charlie Chan ripoff, dealing with pro wrestling in 1939. It's so cool to see how all these different companies, different production styles are done. And I've been doing what I can to take the best from all of those and kind of put it into this one element. And on top of it, there's a few things that like so the majority of our cast are former Chikara talent. And one of the big things for me is that when everything happened with Chikara in June, and not to get into what happened and who did what,
Yeah, we
I'll
don't
just
need to
say
talk about
that
it.
regardless, it's indisputable that a lot of innocent people were harmed by the fact that Chikara closed.
Yeah,
There's a lot
a lot of
of
people got screwed. A lot of people got
yeah,
destroyed. I could tell you that two people who got legitly decimated were Savage Gentleman and Lady Frost. They probably are at the top of the list on
oh,
getting
absolutely.
getting.
They moved their entire lives. They relocated so they could train in Philadelphia. And now they're they had to move back to Pittsburgh, I believe. So many stories like that of wrestling students who knew no other home, of wrestling veterans who dedicated 20 years to this, and now all of a sudden, and some are better adapted than others. A guy like Dasher Hatfield, now he's wrestling as a very good professional
He also
wrestler.
got very lucky with that Super 8 because that Super 8 saved his ass. and
Well, you know what?
and deservingly so.
I'll take a counter stance to that. I think Super 8 was lucky to have him. He is the best professional wrestler unsigned in the world today. And Super 8 had, over the years, over changes in ownership and stuff, their star had fallen from what it once was. And to have Dasher win it was the best choice possible. So I personally, I don't think Dasher was lucky. I think it was a great move. It was good business for both of them. But of the two, I think Super 8 was the one that got better out of
And
the
I, and
deal, personally.
I love a very good professional
But
wrestler, Dasher Hatfield. He was on my show also, and I think
yeah,
he's so good. And I
oh,
think
he's the best. He's the best period in wrestling today, and he's another one who he was supposed to be part of the first two leapfrogs, and something came up each time. But he'll be part of us in the future. He's very much part of the leapfrog family. He's involved with calls. He's involved with leapfrog. Hope I and next leapfrog. I'm not going to give too much away. I'm just going to say he's a very big part of our next one that we're going to film after this.
so.
But
Let's
but you
talk
know what?
about the Halloween one in a second.
Yeah,
But I'm gonna let you finish because I
I'll
know we
just
want.
say that some talent are more adapted, like someone who's been working 15 years, like Dasher Hatfield, than some of the students. So when Chikara closed, Chikara isn't a place. Chikara is a people. And whether you want to call them the Chikara kids, whether you want to call them the Leapfrog Tadpoles, uh, we're a family. And my prime concerns were so many things happened at once. Of we had this basis of putting together this project, so I knew going into it what I wanted to accomplish with combining wrestling and film. And then you have this need of all of these people are without a home, and how do we bring our family together? And then High Tension Wrestling, who was supposed to run their first event in Pennsylvania in May, and they're unable due to lockdown, and they come to me and say, hey, we'd love to put together some type of outdoors event safely. What do you think? And everything just coalesced at once into this perfect thing. And not to say that Campleap Frog's perfect. When I watched the first Campleap Frog back, it was an experiment. It was, for film buffs out there, for horror movie fans, I'll say Campleap Frog, the first one, is the first Evil Dead. It's a fun student experiment. We learned a shit ton about how to make what we are making, because what we're doing is unique. Like, I've produced many wrestling events. I've been on hundreds of shows. it I've never been on one quite like Camp Leapfrog, and uh, we learned a ton from that. We took everything we learned, and if you liked the first Leapfrog, you're going to love this Halloween special. The one consistent thing that every single person who is involved with the post production process, who has seen the finished footage, says is the noticeable uptick in production value, in narrative cohesion, in just overall quality of product with Camp Leapfrog, Things That Go Bump in the Ring. And I am so ready for everyone to see it. I'm so excited to see how everyone's reaction is going to be coming out of it tonight.
And so let's talk about that, because obviously you're the last interview before all this goes down that you're
Yeah.
doing, and I'm going to be promoting it. I'm going to be making sure that as many people can possibly see this. And so it's fun. I mean, I love Halloween. Who doesn't love Halloween? For
Yeah.
candy. I'm a sucker for it, and so is my belly, which is not going to be shown because it's rather larger than I would like it to be. But I digress here. But clearly, what can people expect with it? Because we are going to be seeing this interview in the next 4 or 5 hours. And obviously, I want to convince people to go over to IWTV, pick it up. What can people expect with it? And what can they expect when they see it and it going forward? And I'll also mention that following it, Paris is Bumping is also going to be an amazing show that's following right after at 10 o'clock. So there's two
Yeah, and I
amazing
think,
shows tonight that are going to be fantastic. And I love Billy to death.
oh yeah, we have a double feature, double header tonight with Camp Leapfrog, Things That Go Bump in the Ring, and Paris is Bumping, and I'm so excited to watch that. Like, I haven't seen anything other than what few clips they've released online, and the cinematography, the way they filmed it, the way they edited Paris is Bumping is absolutely beautiful, and I can't wait to see the actual product. But in terms of Leapfrog, I'll say Leapfrog is the perfect event just to chill out. Whether you want to just hang out with some friends, if you're a type of person who wants to roll up a joint, that's what Camp Leapfrog is about. It's about in just accepting the premise and having fun with it. And the same way that we nostalgically build off of campground themed events from the first one, that's still present. That's always going to be present as our aesthetic, but this is more about a salute to horror, to the tropes of it, of the good and the bad tropes, figuring out how to address them, how to subvert them, and in all cases, how to have fun with them, and combine that with good professional wrestling. And you know what? That's my favorite thing about this Camp Leapfrog. I couldn't. I think that if you were to ask 5 different people which the match was the best of the event from Camp Leapfrog, the one that's premiering tonight, I think you'll get 5 different answers. I think we have that much good wrestling, and all the cinematics in between there, they're wild. It's some of the most fun I've ever had shooting. I'm so excited for it.
And to even add to this, because I viewed the first Camp Leapfrog as being age appropriate. So on IWTV, one of the things is that there's things that are age appropriate for everybody, and there's things that are not age appropriate. So I don't view ICW No Holds Bar to be meant for a 7-year-old. I really
Mm-hmm.
don't. I think a 7-year-old might be able to handle it and might enjoy it, but also if I had a 7-year-old, I wouldn't let them watch ICW No Holds Bar.
I wouldn't either. I don't blame you for that.
But Camp Leapfrog, I think I would allow them to watch much, much easier. Chikara, and not to bring up because that's now a dirty word, I viewed, and I don't have a kid yet, but I'm going to feel a lot more comfortable with that type of product. The wrestling is fun, or other things like that, because I think it's much aged at that age range, and I think Camp Leapfrog is more in that age range.
I think it's depending on your style of parenting and what you want your kids exposed to. Like in terms of content, we have a couple of F-bombs. Beyond that, I can't really think of anything that's inappropriate. Like it's there's a couple of F-bombs.
I think parents don't want to give their kid blood and then having light tubes jammed into like somebody's head. I think that's what people are more concerned about than a few F-bombs at this moment.
So there's a couple matches. There's no blood in Camp Leapfrog. There's a couple matches that definitely get hardcore. Some of them shockingly so. Like you'd be surprised at how far they go. I certainly was. IWTV certainly was, but nothing that goes to the point where it's inappropriate, I think, beyond the realm of professional wrestling. There's a handful of F-bombs. I don't think it's gratuitous. I think it's they're comedic. It's lighthearted. It's kind of in terms of tone, I guess think Chikara with its hair let down. Think Chikara where you're not necessarily worried about it being G-rated, family friendly. Like, is it R-rated? Is it X-rated? No,
but it's a PG-13 movie. It's a PG-13 movie.
Yeah, I think so. I would say that probably.
And obviously, where can people find it, and what's going on with something else? I think something else is happening before it, also on the Facebook page you mentioned.
Okay, so I'll give you the full rundown right now. So. Just to what we were talking about before, Tales from the Mat, you can find at talesfromthemat.com. That if you go there and click maimed, you'll see a ton of ways that you could listen. Or if you have Apple Podcasts, you can go right to there and type in Tales from the Mat. We have the first audio documentary up. It's 2 hours long. I'll probably I'd like to do one once a month, a audio documentary. I don't necessarily know that each one will be 2 hours. Like if I do a nice 15-minute or 45-minute thing, it's as long as a string. It's as long as it needs to be, But I'm waiting till after Camp Leapfrog. If that becomes a more in-demand thing, could Tales from the Mat be more regular? Absolutely. But for Camp Leapfrog, so we're going to have our version of a free-for-all, which is hosted by Sam Laterna, who is the host of Camp Leapfrog and my co-writer, co-booker. She's awesome. There's no Camp Leapfrog without Sam Laterna. She's hosting Open Swim, our version of a free-for-all. That's going to air at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time on the Independent Wrestling Facebook page, and it's going to run for a half hour prior to Leapfrog. And that is a mix of, there's an interview with Cheeseburger, who is a good close friend. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to be in Camp Leapfrog's Halloween special, but he's part of our family, always is. We have a exclusive interview with him. We have behind the scenes footage, and we have an exclusive web exclusive bonus match. Ooh, easy for me to say. From the first from a Halloween special that we filmed just for this Open Swim. That's all going to be on the Independent Wrestling Facebook page, 7:30 to 8, and it's a really fun show. Then at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on IWTV, that's when Campleap Frog Things That Go Bump in the Ring premieres. And anyone who wants to watch it can watch it, because if you don't have an IWTV account, you can try one free for 5 days if you sign up with promo code LEAPFROG. And I don't know of a single person who signed up for IWTV and hasn't renewed it, hasn't gone it, because it's awesome. It's $10 a month, and it's indie wrestling, and it's indie wrestling from the 80s, 90s, today, US, Canada, Mexico, Japan. New content constantly being added, whether it's from the vault of like old VHS and DVDs.
And also,
I'm gonna
add to your promo, just so people know, tomorrow night is Matt Tremont's last match with Ricky and Page. And then it's the Last Extravaganza Part 2 also is happening on Saturday night. So there is new live content. There's premieres every Wednesday. The Masked Wrestler, also Limitless Wrestling, is doing new shows every Wednesday now. And then obviously Beyond is going to come back at some point. I don't know when. But obviously there's so much new content coming out, a combination of both live events and premieres. So I just want to state that, where there's legitimately a huge amount of opportunity. And I also think that you could buy it yearly at a much more discount rate still, which is great because it's cheaper yearly. And I renewed automatically, and I'm obviously a big IWTV fan, and I can say that I am very satisfied with the product and the way it's gone.
And you know what? Even if you're listening to this interview and you think, hey, Campleap Frog, it's cool what you're doing, but it's not for me. There's so much more on IWTV, whether it's UWFI from Japan from the 80s and 90s, or I get to go back and watch a lot of the independent wrestling I grew up watching in the early 2000s, so it's wonderful. But yeah, so Tales from the Mat on Apple Podcasts. Open Swim, Campleap Frog on Independent Wrestling's Facebook tonight, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Campleap Frog, Things That Go Bump in the Ring, 8 p.m. And you can always find me on social media at Ref Kris Levin, and that's Kris with a K because my parents are difficult.
Well, I think we covered everything, and I think everybody should go watch Campleap Frog because I think it's going to be amazing. I think also Paris is Bumping is going to be great too, following it almost immediately, if not immediately. And I'm pretty sure that if Campleap Frog runs over, which I don't think it will, they're going to play Paris is Bumping anyhow, because I know IWTV has done that before, which is cool.
Yeah, with the way that Campleap Frog timed out, I imagine it'll be like a 10-minute intermission between that and Paris is Bumping.
Which means you can go get your alcohol, everybody, or go to the bathroom. It's one or the other, or both. I'm just saying that's something I might be doing. I got some alcohol, I'll be fine, it'll be great. So I'm just saying that's what I might be doing. So if you see some obscure tweets from me, everybody, we all know the reason why.
And please do tweet along. We're going to have hashtag Spooky Leapfrog. That's going to be starting around once we do Open Swim, and all night. It's the best way to chat with everyone, to get in touch, see what everyone's doing, what everyone thinks. I had so much fun last time around chatting with everyone on Twitter, and I can't wait to do the same tonight.
So I think we're going to leave it off on that note, but I am going to say this. Obviously, definitely go support Kris and what he's doing. Refs matter. Refs are important. Obviously, he's keeping a bunch of wrestlers safe. Go support Campleap Frog, his baby. Go check out his audio docudrama /podcast, because that's kind of what it is. I'm letting you know it's a podcast. It's not an audio docudrama, but it technically is also. I'm just saying. As well as support indie wrestling, support IWTV. Use that promo code, because that promo code lets IWTV know a lot of stuff, and it's super helpful. It's super helpful if you use that promo code. And that's Leapfrog. So you use that, and it'll be good, and I'm sure it's all over social media. Super important to use that if you're not an IWTV subscriber at the moment, and I think that if you pick up IWTV, even for the month, afterwards for $10 just to try it out, I think you're going to be with them forever. I really do think that you are. WWE Network is $10 a month, and you could choose one or the other or both if you really want to, but clearly I think IWTV has so much value. And then, that you should go support people, because it's super important. It's $10 a month. You're going to get so much content. And look, if you can't, I recommend you pick up that free promo anyway, just to try it. And it's super important right now also, and I've been saying it in every single interview, you have to support people on social media. And a social media follow is so important right now in the middle of COVID, in the middle of what's going on, because people really like that, and followers do matter. Likes matter on Facebook. Hearts matter on Facebook also. If you're going to do something, especially during that live IWTV thing, actually do hearts over likes, because hearts are actually more important, and it actually boosts it up on Facebook because of their algorithm. I don't know if anybody knew that, but likes are helpful as well. Hearts are actually more important at the moment. And so definitely heart things on Facebook, retweet on Twitter, engage on Twitter during these wrestling shows, because it also lets wrestlers know certain things. And there's no excuse anymore, because the internet's free pretty much for everybody. I mean, the internet's not free, but you're paying for your internet anyway, and you're watching this. And unless you don't have electricity or internet, clearly you should be doing that at the very minimum. At the very minimum, using that free promo code. So that's all I have for everybody. Definitely go support it. I'm going to be watching, so you can follow me. I'm at Pop Anime Comics. I will be tweeting tonight for the majority of it. Maybe every match, maybe every other match. I haven't decided exactly. I'm also probably going to be drinking, so I drunk tweet, and it's going to be great. I'm going to regret it tomorrow, I promise. I got a half a bottle of Honey Jack, so clearly left, and I'm going to go possibly get some more in the middle of a rainstorm in Washington, D.C. So that's what I'm going to be doing. So I recommend everybody go do that. Go follow Kris's podcast. Otherwise, I will come and kill you. I'm just saying. And that's all I have. So thank you so much for being on.
Dude, thank you so much for having me. I had a blast.